Hi viewers, and welcome to the channel, and welcome to another episode of the mini-series for the freeCAD Curves Workbench. In this episode we're going to be looking at the blend tool and the discretize or discretize edge tool in there, and we're going to be using those to create such surfaces as this. Now these tools are curves tools, they're not surfaces tools. The surface is created either with a pipe shell or the standard part loft. I'll be using the standard part loft in there. But what this allows you to, this blend curve, is to allows you to create configurable curves in there to manipulate your surface into the shape and the size that you want. We'll also be looking at the discretize edge as well, that actually creates a number of points which can be extruded and used as scaffolding to hold these curves. We'll be taking a simple example, very similar to this one, as a bicycle seat, and learn how we can actually create a surface to fulfill that application. So let's have a look at the tool and how to use it. If you like this video, please hit a like and also subscribe to the channel. I also have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate my contributions to the community, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0. So through this series we've been using the Curves Workbench extensively, and the Curves Workbench holds a number of tools to deal with curves and surfacing. The curves are normally kept to the left hand side here, these tools here, and they deal with lines and bead splines and manipulating those. The surface tools are to the right hand side here, which deal with actually surfacing the model. These are classed as the more shiny tools, the more interesting of the lot. But it's easy to underestimate the power that you have of these curves tools. In this video we're going to be using two, and that's the blend. That blends a curve between two edges, and also the discretize tool. With these two tools we'll be creating surfaces which allow you to change the continuity of each of the profiles on an individual basis, and also looking at some fancy extrude methods that we can use with the discretize. So what I'm going to do, because I'm already in a new document, we're going to first start by creating a shape in there using the sketcher. So I'm going to come over to the sketcher workbench, and I'm going to create a new sketch. Just going to use the XY plane for the time being and hit OK. Now we're not looking at the application at the moment, we're looking at how to actually use that tool. I'm going to create two lines in here, like so, and hit close. So we've got two sketch lines. Now to use the blend tool, come up to the Curves Workbench, and it's this tool here, the blend curves between two edges. We're going to pick both these lines and learn actually how that works. So you need a selection first, so we need to select an edge, holding down Control, I'll select the other edge, and we click on the blend curve between two edges. Also available on Curves Blend Curve. Zoom out a bit, you can see what's happened. It's created a blend between those two with a single curve. And if I just press the space bar, highlight the sketch and press the space bar, you can see where that's attached. That's attached in the middle. We've got full control of where this is attached, the continuity of the curve, and how much scaling that curve has. Let's come into the blend curve and have a look at it. And what I'm going to do is just bring this up a bit more. Now if you notice, I selected first the one on the left and the one on the right. That means this will be edge 1 and this will be edge 2. And this is reflected in the blend curve. If you look down on the data tab, we have properties and values. If we look down, you can see we get to edge 1 and edge 2. And about 4 or 5 different elements in there. We have something called the continuity, the edge, which is the sketch and edge 1 for our first one. So if we hover over that, you can see down the bottom it says sketch edge 1. Now second is sketch edge 2, which is here. The continuity affects the curvature. If we drop this down, you can see we go from C0 right up to G4. These reflect how continuous that curve is. So for instance, if I hit C0, you can see from edge 1 we have a C0 curve going into a G1 curve. Let me just change the other one to C0 and see what we get. You have to either press Ctrl R or click off, and you can see we've got a straight curve or a straight line going from one to the other. This is still a curve. It's always best to start from continuity 0 and work your way up. Therefore you can determine what type of curve you want, the scaling, and whereabouts it's placed on that object. Before we get into the continuity, it's best to actually place this in the position that we want. This may be the position that you want, but I actually want it attached to the top here. So if we come over to the left hand side for this edge here, which is edge 1, so we've got edge 1, come down to the parameter, you can see it's saying 19.42. Let's go back into our sketch and have a look. Let's take this and place a height on here. You can see it's saying 35.25. Hit OK and close that. I'm going to click back on my blend curve, just zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing. We know that these are roughly about the same height. Look at parameter 1 and we'll just move this. You can see that's moving up and down that line there. Move it all the way to the top and you can see it's hitting near 0. So I hit 0, that places it at the top there. Let's change this to 35. You can see it's gone all the way down to the bottom. And if I do it to something like 40 and hit enter, we've got 35.25, which represents the height of that edge there, that sketch. So you can see how this relates to the height of the sketch and what placement along that edge that will be placed. So if I hit 0, it's going to place it at the top, and if I do something like 40, it's going to round it down to the height of that element and place it there. We've got reverse here if you want to use that, and that will just reverse that. So the height now is 35.25 and at the base it's 0. So we've got a choice of working in different orientations there. I'm going to work in the reversed orientation, and I'm going to do the same with the other one. And with parameter 2 here, I'm going to place this at 0 as well. And we can see what height that is. Just put a large number in here, enter, and that's 35.11. And we can check that by going back into our sketch and placing a height on there. And it's saying 35.07, and that's because there's no vertical constraint on there. So this is actually at an angle. So if I do a length 35.11, there we go. Let's close that. So we know that has reference to the height of those two elements. Let's go back into the blend curve. Let's change the continuity. So I'm looking at this edge here, and I'm going to change that to a G1 continuity there. This still has C0, so we're just using 1 at the moment and affecting that. Now this scaling has caused this to go right up into the air like so. We're just going to bring that scaling down. So pressing the up and down arrow keys, we can change the scale on that. So I'm just increasing the scaling and bringing that right down. And you can see if I bring this right down, we end up affecting the curve with that continuity there. You can see how this curve is ramping, showing that continuity there. Let's leave it at that and change the continuity again, so to G2. And you can see how this differs. G3, and the curvature is changing there. So it's up to you what type of continuity you want in there. If we change the continuity on the other side, then this is still at the moment a straight C0, and we can change that to something like a G3 as well. And click off and come down and change the scaling. So you can see that continuity between the geometry of those two sketches. So this is all well and good. We know how to use this. We can come in here and even change the edge if we so desire. So if we had, say, another line in our sketch, say in the middle here, we can swap between these lines just by coming into the blend curve, and I'm going to affect edge 2, which is this one here. So you can see it says edge 2. I'm going to click on this, and we can come over and click, well, hit clear first and click on the other one. So this is edge 3 now. Hit OK and then Control R, and that's placed it on edge 3. And now we can change whatever we want on edge 2, which is now edge 3, and also go through the scaling. So this is good, but how can we use it? It's very simple how to use this blend curve. There's only a few options in here, but what applications can we use this in? Well, I've just cleared down the screen and we're starting afresh. We've got a new document open. Let's have a look at something in here. Let's say I wanted to create a bicycle seat. We can use these tools to actually create that bicycle seat and affect the curvature of that seat at different parts. So we first need our shape. So I'm going to come into the sketcher and I'm going to create a new sketch. Go on the XY plane. Now I'm not going to fully constrain the sketch, it's best to, but for speed I'm just going to go through and create the basic shape of one half of the saddle on here. And to do that, I'm just going to use a circle one side and a circle on the other side and create a curve between there. Let's go for an arc and connect up the arc to here and to about on this side and create a curvature in there. We'll hit escape and just move these and manipulate these slightly until we get the desired effect. Just going to use some trimming to trim out parts of this. So I'm going to trim out this here, and because I want this as one half, I'm going to use a line, and we're going to place a line right the way down through the middle of this object, and then use the trim to trim parts of this object away. And I think that is about it. So we've got this object here. It's not fully correct. It wouldn't be the shape that I really want, but it will do for this demonstration. Let's close that. Obviously this is not fully constrained, and I've noticed that in here we've got an extra piece here which I don't need. It's not fully constrained. I would fully constrain this. Quite easy to constrain, but for speed we're going with that. So this is our basic path that we need to follow. I'm going to create another object in here. Now there's two ways that I can tackle this. We can tackle this by placing a single extruded vertex in the center here and curving out from this vertex to the sides, or we could place a line across here with a number of vertices going up and curving lines out to create the profiles. Either way, we're going to use both the blend tool and the discretize tool over in the Curves Workbench. I'm going to first go from the center, so I'm going to need something to extrude from the center. To do that, I'm going to come back into the sketch and I'm going to go for the center point round about, I'm thinking about here, to radiate out curves from, or I could do it from here. We'll just go for the center point here. So I'm just going to create a simple circle on this center point, or even just a line across here, like so. So we've got a single line here. Hit close, so we've got that there. We can jump over to the Curves Workbench now, and I'm going to create this with a join curve as a single curve that goes around here. Because I want to take that line and use this discretize tool. If we've got these curves here and control click them and use discretize, we're only going to get one edge, and I need all these edges here. We'll understand what this is in a moment. I'm just going to delete that. I just clicked on it and hit the delete key. So I'm going to take this edge here, click on the sketch. I can't click on the sketch because it selects this part here, so I'm just going to click the edges, holding down control. You can also use a box selection in here if you come up to edit and use box element selection, and then you can draw a line in here if we first select that tool. Shift plus E if you're using shortcuts, and you can see I've selected that box there. So Shift E and then just take your finger off Shift E and you can select that as a box selection. A lot easier. You can do that with golden surfaces as well. So you don't have to select the individual parts, the rails and the profiles, just box selection around there and use your golden surface against those. So we're going to come up to the join curves to join that as one curve. I'm going to do this, well, I'm not going to do the same here because this is just one curve, so this is fine. I can just hide that sketch, and I'm going to click on that curve and use the discretize tool. That will create that curve as a series of points. And this is important because I'm going to extrude each of these vertices in one go, and this is going to create the basis to attach our curve to, like we saw in our sketch when we had two lines and we created a blend between them. So we've got our discretize edge, and I'm going to bring the numbers down to something like 10 because there's way too many along there, and we've still got inside here the join curve is still visible. So if I hit spacebar on that join curve, that just make it invisible, and you can see each of those edges there. We'll just leave it invisible for the time being and click on the discretize edge. Come over to the part workbench, and I'm just going to use an extrude on that, and we're going to extrude it by something like 30 millimeters. It's going to be extruded along the Z, so I'm going to click the Z plane. Now we can go minus or plus depending on where we want to go. We can change this afterwards as well. So if I hit OK, you can see those have been extruded. And let's come back into our extrude and have a look at that. Let's give us a bit more room. There's a discretize edge. So we've extruded down from that. We can change that extrude by clicking on extrude, having a look, and I want to increase this a bit more by 35 or 40 millimeters. And we're looking at also which way it's going. So we've extruded, you can find it, we've extruded downwards. So here's the direction here. So we can just change this to a positive number, and that will extrude upwards. So we've got our lines there which we've extruded around. And I'm going to use this to guide our blend curves. I'm going to come back into the sketch, and now I want to do the same with this one. So we come over to our Curves Workbench. I'm going to click that edge, and I'm going to use the discretize in there as well. And for that one, we're going to come down. We've got 100 along there, and I just really want one. But I'm going to give myself a choice. It's coming out 2. I'm going to give myself a choice of 3 in there. So we've got 3 in there. So if I click on that sketch, press the spacebar, you can see we've got 3 points. We're going to use that discretize edge again. Coming over to the part workbench, make sure it's selected. Use extrude, and with extruding this 40 millimeters, we can go further if we so desire. But I'm going to use the base of this to connect up to rather than the top. And we want it along the Z. At the moment it's minus, so that's positive. And OK that. And that's now place those like so. So with the discretize edge, we can actually create a number of extrudes in there and use these as extrudes for our surfacing. If you think about it, if you're coming from an architecture background, well, this could be your foundation and this could be the poles that you will attach material to create your walls. So we can create an external or an internal structure there to actually hang things off of. So if you're an architect, we'll be looking at that. Actually in the future as well, this one thing that I'm going to go into is actually showing you how to use the Curves Workbench for an architecture purpose as well. So we have our extrudes. So we can now create some blend curves between these. I'm going to pick one of these. So I'm just going to use this one here. And I'm going to come over to the Curves Workbench. Now, if I press spacebar on here, it's going to make them vanish. But for learning purposes, we're going to isolate one of these. So I'm going to just use the join curves just to isolate one of those. So that one's there. I've isolated that one. So I can click on that extrude, or click over here and press the space bar. And we've just got one here that we're going to use. We've got all of these extrudes now, and if you haven't figured it out already, we're going to do the same as what we did with our sketch. Might be a bit long to do this, so what I'm going to do is do one or two and then I'm going to plow through the others, speed up the video and then come back to it and start doing our surfacing. So what we're looking at is taking this line and connecting up this line. So clicking on one, control click the other, pressing down the control key. I can let go of the control key now and use the blend curve between two edges, or from the curves we use the same tool, blend curve. That blends those between those two edges. Now that's blended between there, what I'm going to do is show you how to modify this just using the one, and that modification then can be used across them all. So we'll just do one for the time being. We'll then lay down the curves for all of these and then modify them as a whole. So we've got the blend curve in here, and I always start with continuity of 0. Let's give us a bit more space. One side, so edge 1. It's important as well, let me just delete this, to understand which way you're working. So I'm working from center outwards. So that means edge 1 will always be the center one. It's quite easy to go click, click, blend, click, click, blend, and then all of a sudden you're down here and you mistakenly click one and blend it the other way. It's not a game changer, it just makes life a little bit harder when we come back to actually surfacing this and understanding which way around we selected these and which edges have the continuity and which edges don't. So I always go from center, control click center, control click the out, and create the blend. Now I've got that blend between there, we can click on it and set the continuity for both edges to 0. That gives us an understanding of whereabouts these sit. As you can see, sitting around about the middle. These all have an extrude. If we go back to the extrude, we've extruded these all by 40mm. So the top length of these, as in the parameterization of these, will be 40mm for each of these. So in here, 40mm. That's the top, and 0 is obviously the bottom. So we've got the continuity of 0 there from tip to tip. I'm going to change the continuity of this here. So I want this line on the base. So I can do one of two things. I can come into the edge 2 and I can either set parameter to 0, or I can reverse this if I so desire. So that sticks it on the bottom. That's you which one you choose. Just make sure you're consistent throughout. I prefer to keep it simple and set this to 0, the parameter to 0. So that's at the base 0 working up. I'm going to then change the continuity. So I'm just going to go for G1 continuity. And it's flexing downwards at the moment. So I want this to go up. So I'm going to change the scale, pressing up and down on the keyboard. And I'm going to come in and just decide on the curvature I want. So that's a minus 90 there. Go a bit further, minus 105. So we've got that there. We can change the continuity here if we so desire, but I think I'm going to go for that for the time being. So now we've done one. What we can do to save ourselves some time, we can click on one, control click the other, and use the blend, and do the same. Click, control click, make sure you get the center, blend, and just do the same for all of them. You may have to turn this around slightly so you can see parts of your model working from the middle to the out each time, making sure we don't miss any. What I'm going to do now is get a bit cluttered in here, so I'm going to control click all of these and just hide them. Actually, I'm going to just click on this one, so I've unselected that, and just hide the others so I know which one I'm up to, and we'll carry on. Now I have tried clicking on this one and then clicking on here and trying the blend, but it doesn't seem to want to work. Maybe clicking on this one and coming down and clicking, well, we can't because it's all part of our extrude, so we would have to extrude these out, each of these out, and isolate them. So that's not going to work because we don't have that in there. So I'm just going to carry on clicking and control clicking these and using the blend between them. And you can see we're almost there, and what will happen is that towards the end I will make them all visible and then edit them as one. So I've got them all in there now. We can come in and have a look at these. So we've got this one's invisible up to this one. Hit the spacebar. Those are visible now. And this one, hit the spacebar. So we've got these blend curves in place, and we've got some editing to do here. So what we need to do is come up to our first one. Now this one was correct. This is the one we're going to be using as, say, a template. So one or two things we can do. We can either remember all the values here and then select all the others and change them, or we can select our template one and come down and select the last one. So we've got all those selected. Whatever changes we do to the first one will affect the others, but remember that because we selected them, we've got these changes already in place. So we have to look at the change, click off, and then click back on, and all of them will change. So the scale here is 5, and I don't know if I change this, but I'm just going to set it to 1. Control R, and then set that back to 5. Control R. One thing I know I did change was the parameter. So let's set that to 0, and then set that back to 40. Maybe it wasn't that one. Set that to C0, and then back to G1. And the scale minus 105, so set that to 1 and set that back to 5. And there we've got our surface that's becoming present now. May want to change some of these curves because we're going to get a dip down here. So for instance, this curve, we can scale this whatever way we want. So I'm going to scale this down. Don't worry about this line that's appeared down here. That's just a visual glitch. You can see it's disappeared. And now we have a surface starting to appear. Or the start of a surface. These will be all used as profiles. So what I can do now is come over to the part And I'm just going to file save this just in case we get this far and something drastic happens. So we've got the start of our bike seat here, and we can come in and click on the utility to Loft. Because we've built these in sequence all the way along, we can click on one and double click it to add it. Just keep our mouse pointer there. Those are adding them all in there, or we can click and press the right. And these are, we're going to loft these. So what I'm doing is adding all the profiles in sequence, and we're going to loft through these. This is utility to Loft. Hit OK, and there's our loft that goes across those. So we've made our surface there, and we can come into our loft and change, say, the max degrees to 2 to make it a bit more better there, the way it follows. And we can adjust some of these profiles and pull the bottom up of some, change the curve so you can see the curvature of some of these goes right down or partly there. And we can change the different curvatures, so we could actually have the curvature of all these profiles and swap them around. Now we've got those blends in there. So we take all these blends and bring this back up so we can see what we're doing. And we can play with the continuity here. So for instance, let's just swap these around. So that's C0G1. That's going to be interesting. And we'll just scale that down a bit. And let's keep on going. Pressing Ctrl R to refresh so I can edit this as I go. And we can start to change this. And I'm not happy with that, so I'm going to set it back to what it was before, C0, G1. And let's have a look around here. You can see where these come down. And for instance, we can take this one. And what I'm going to do is just hide the extrude so we can see where that extrude is. So we've umbrellaed from the center basically and umbrellaed out. Personally, I would do this for a different way and come in and have a line across here and connect them up to that line so we have the curves radiating from that line. But we can do that in a second as well to see how we can actually use that in that case. But again, we've got total control over these and whereabouts they actually sit and what scaling we want to use. So we can bring this one up, to make shape this surface. If we do it the other way, if I delete this loft by clicking on it and hitting delete, then we could get rid of these blends. And we've gone back to, let's press the space button on this extrude, and we've got this extrude here. So what I'm going to do is utilize that, come into it, have a look at the original sketch, and we're just going to bring this line right the way along here. And also the same for this one. And close that. As you can see, it hasn't affected, or it has affected, but it hasn't broken our extrudes there on that discretize edge because it covers that edge now. And if we stick this up to something like 10, you see, well, we're going to have to change that. So this is sketch edge 4. Now the reason why, if we look at this, and look at that edge, that is one single edge there? So it looks like we may have to redo this discretize. So let's get rid of that discretize. So it's going to kill the extrude, which is fine. Let's get rid of the extrude. It's going to kill the join curve. Let's get through that join curve, and now we can click that edge, just that edge, and we need to be in the Curves Workbench and use the discretize along there, and we only need 10, don't we? So let's come in and that discretized edge, set that to 10, and then click on that edge, come over to the part and use our extrude and set that to something like 40. Can't determine normal vector of shape. That's because we need to set the vector in the custom direction Z1 40, so we're extruding upwards. Hit OK, and those extrudes are in place. So now we've got the extrudes in place, then we can go ahead and create the profiles that we want along here. In the same way, by clicking one and then clicking the other and creating that profile across there. We may want to, for instance, click this one and then this one and create a profile that goes over here, so we fill in this gap. So we might need some customization along here. If we so do need that customization, then maybe a discretized edge is not what we need. And those extrudes, we can actually go back and delete those. And we've got rid of that edge, and we're going to use instead a split curve. So curves, we can use the split curve on there. That gives us a vertex which we can extrude. So in the part, we can extrude that along Z. Make sure it's positive, so it's going outwards, and something like 40. Okay, that. So we've got that edge there, and now we can use that edge there. But also, if we go to the split curve, we can come into the values and add some more values in here. So let's add a 25% in here, and we've created a new face with a new edge, and we can use that edge to create that curve. So I want that curve connected to this one, and then over in the Curves Workbench we can then blend between those and use those as a profile. So that blend curve, again, affecting the continuity between the two and the scaling, also the parameter. So this one will be 40, the other one set the continuity to 0 and parameter as 0, and then coming down and changing the scale with the continuity, which one you want. So for instance, we can change that and bring it up, create the curve that we want. And we can do the same for all of these going along this way and creating the profiles that we want to sweep along this way. And that means that these are fully configurable. So we can go into our split curve, double click it, and change these wherever we want. Double click that, and our curve changes. So that shows you the power of these tools up here. So we can affect this curve, place it wherever we want for our surfacing, double click, and there we go. So we've got the curve in a different place. And if we so desire, we can change the placement of that curve. So we've got on extrude edge 7. And we'll clear that and place it on this one instead. OK, that. Control R, and we've flipped the placement of that curve. So we've got a fully editable placement here by using that extrude with the split curve, which we can double click and move these edges wherever we want, and just double click again. That also means when it comes to our loft through these profiles, we can play with the loft to get the best results that we want. So I hope that was useful. That demonstrates that these tools here, although they're not as exciting as these, they are the foundations of your modeling. So we can use them to really affect those surfaces underneath. And they become just as shiny and just as interesting as these tools here. So I'm going to leave you with that for today. Please join me again throughout the week for more modeling tutorials, and also on Wednesdays for the Curves Workbench mini-series. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you again. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my site. And also I have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate a few pence or a few pounds, dollars, or whatever your currency is. And that's at ko-fi.com/mang0. And there you'll be able to help me fund my site, and all the money that I actually get from any funds will actually get pushed back into the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing. I'll see you next time.